going. Good evening, everyone. My name is Janet Forrest. I'm one of the program coordinators at the Nantucket Athenaeum. I'm here along with my colleague, Daniel Griffin. He's in the background. So welcome to Yummy Monday. I see a few familiar faces. I see some new faces. We do this weekly, and it's always exciting to have new people featured. So this week we have Ron and Myrna. Bocage, is that right? Bocage? Right. And they are residents of Nantucket now, but they are originally from New Orleans. And tonight they're going to be showing us how to make gumbo. So I'm going to pass it along to you guys and you can get started.
Okay. My lovely assistant, Myrna.
I'll be behind the camera.
Hello, everyone. Glad you could join us. Hi, guys. Tonight we're going to cook some gumbo in real time. Hopefully I've done all the prep. So we should be able to fit this in the time and have a finished dish to show you. Obviously, Myrna and I were born and raised in New Orleans. Unlike the Inky Mirror article, we're not residents of New Orleans now. We were up until we finished college. But we left to come up to New England for graduate school and never left. And we were Boston residents for a long time. And then when we retired, we became residents of Nantucket. So we've been residents for what, 13 years? Something like that. Any event, what we're doing tonight is something called gumbo, which is I believe, an African word for the word okra. That's where the name comes from. There are all sorts of gumbos in Louisiana. It's the state dish, I guess, suppose. If not red beans and rice, it's definitely gumbo. Certainly for New Orleans and southern Louisiana, it's gumbo. The two major categories of gumbo are Creole and Cajun. And Creole gumbo, it tends to be thinner, soupier, not as hot. Cajun gumbos tend to be thicker with a lot more pepper in them. And the main reason for that is that a lot of Cajun gumbos are done using game, like wild duck and that kind of thing. And when you use wild duck and game and stuff like that, it can take a thicker roux, which is what gives thickness to the gumbo, and also can take the heat, which is probably originally put all that heat in there to cover the fact that the meat wasn't quite as fresh as it should be. In any event, the gumbo we're making tonight, although it's a filet gumbo, which is the seafood in andouille using filet. And there are several different thickening agents used in gumbo. The main thickening agent is a roux, which I'm sure you all know is just fat and flour. Another thickening agent is okra, which we're not using tonight. It's a vegetable, which some of you may have used and some maybe not. And the third thickening agent is something called filet, which is it's a ground sassafras is what it is. And it was used by the Choctaws, Choctaw Indians, who were the tribe that lived in Louisiana. It was used by them as a seasoning agent and also a thickening agent. So it does have a thickening qualities as well. The gumbo we're making tonight is one you would find in New Orleans. It's called, in New Orleans, it would be just referred to as filet gumbo rather than seafood and andouille. And filet gumbo could probably contain almost anything. Very often it contains things like chicken and even soup meat, which is basically a cheap cut of meat. You know, gumbos were made by basically for poor people who just threw everything they had into it. When it came time to make the gumbo, they threw everything they could find in the ice box. So it was infrequent to find in New Orleans a gumbo that used things like shrimp, for example. Shrimp is in a lot of dishes, and it's not as expensive. This is an expensive dish up here because everything costs more. But let me tell you what we're doing tonight. What we're doing is the shrimp and andouille gumbo. And what do you need to make it? Well, you need some implements first. You need this, a big handled whisk. You need a square-edged spoon, wooden utensil like this, just for making the roux. And also you need a large spoon, cooking spoon like that. In terms of pots, you need a large pot to put the gumbo in. This is a lot of it. I'm using a Dutch oven tonight, but you could use a stock pot, whatever you have. And most important implement is this, which is a black iron, cast iron pan. And that's what we're going to make the roux in.
Ron, what's the size of your pan? Is that like a 17-inch or 15?
No, this is about a 12-inch.
12-inch? Okay.
It's a 12-inch pan. They're heavy. It's if you're going to buy one with a handle on the end, like that, just so you can handle it. It has a short handle, so it's hard to handle unless you're a very powerful person. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at the ingredients. Before you start the roux, the first thing you need to do is get everything, your mise en place. You need everything in place and ready to go, because the roux actually takes a very, very short period of time to make. Unlike most roux, most of you are familiar with French cooking, but know that a classic roux is low and slow. You use a low heat and you take for a long time and cook the flour at a very low temperature until it gets the desired color. And that's how Creoles cook roux as well. And they don't cook it all that dark, maybe peanut butter color, that kind of thing. But that could take up to maybe a half hour to cook a roux, when my mother used to cook roux. This dish I'm doing tonight is actually based on a Cajun recipe from Paul Prudhomme, who was the king of Cajun, Cajun cooking. So he came up with this method for, maybe this is how they do it on the bayou, I don't know. But the first I'd ever seen of this method was from Paul Prudhomme in his book. And it's kind of revolutionary. And so what you need to do the roux are these items here. I'll show you. There's obviously oil and fat, which is here and here. And you have vegetables and seasoning mix, garlic, and this event will come in afterward, after the roux. All right, so actually that should be over the other side. So those are the implements of the roux. So what's in the vegetable mix is onion, bell pepper, and celery, which is fairly finely chopped and using a food processor. It's the easiest way to do it. So we're going to start. And what you want to do is you put your pan on the highest, the biggest burner you've got, highest BTU, and you get it cranking. That's fine. So you pour in your oil. And this is going to take a couple of minutes to come up to temperature. Now the temperature you want on your oil, we're not really going to measure the temperature. What you want to do is to get this oil smoking. I mean, literally smoking. The entire process for cooking a roux in this particular case is done over extremely high heat, as high as you can get it. So it has to be high, otherwise it doesn't work. You might as well go back to the original roux recipe of low and slow, unless you have really high heat. So we're gonna wait until this, you're gonna be able to see, you get down like this, and you'll be able to see wisps of smoke coming up off the pan. So that's gonna take a couple of minutes. So one of the things, there are a couple of points in the recipe. This is one of them. And later on, there's a point at which the gumbo, once it's in the pot and it's simmering, there's about a 15-minute simmer period. And during those periods, we could answer questions. I figured that'd be better than me blabbering on about anything, whatever came to mind.
I did
So
put
if you have any questions.
I put the recipe in the chat for anyone that's following along where you can download it. But if you're having trouble seeing it, I'll email it out to everyone. And I forgot to mention there are a limited supply of spice packets. So if you look at that recipe, you need a variety of spices. And you can actually swing by the library foyer when the library's open. And courtesy of Annie and Annie's Whole Foods and her team, they put together the spice packet that has the right amount and all the ingredients. So they're in a shoebox as you walk in the foyer while you go and pick up your books. You can grab a spice packet.
You might actually be able to sell that spice packet in New Orleans. People make gumbo.
I'll let the Athenaeum people know. Send it over to development. They can go down to New Orleans and sell them.
But if there's anybody who would like to ask about some of these, any questions about the ingredients or other types of gumbo, one of the interesting gumbos, which I can also share a recipe for, there are probably two gumbos in New Orleans that everybody makes. One is filet, which is more like a soup served over rice. But the other one is okra gumbo, which my mother made and everybody's mother makes.
Yes.
And it's much thicker. It's almost like a stew. It's also served over rice. Pretty much everything in New Orleans is served over rice. And it uses okra and shrimp, ham, maybe some sausages. Ah, it's starting to pop. No, not an okra. Not mine. Let's see. There are other ones I've had that I love duck gumbo. There's a gumbo that's made by a couple of Cajun chefs down in New Orleans that's just absolutely delicious. And the Cajuns have a very strange thing they do. They serve their gumbo over potato salad. I don't know if you've ever had potato salad. Potato salad in the South Louisiana is a very mayonnaise-y kind of affair. It has eggs in it. It has celery and potatoes and pickles and onions, all kinds of other stuff. And it's kind of very smooth and quite tasty. I think a little mustard in it.
Would you eat it cold or warm, the potato
And
salad?
it's cold.
Cold.
It's always served cold or at room temperature. In the case of gumbo, you'd serve it at room temperature and put a scoop of it on the bottom of your plate before you pour the gumbo on. And I had never had that before with gumbo. I mean, we ate potato salad all the time. But with gumbo, it was, ooh, what is that? And it was delicious. It was absolutely, with duck gumbo in particular, because of the gamey flavors. The potato played off of that beautifully. Let's see how we're doing.
It's popping.
It's popping, but it's smoking. You can see the heat rising off of it, and yeah, starting to smoke. There are little wisps of smoke coming. Can you see it? I don't know if you can see it. Probably not because I'm behind. Can you see? Anyway, there are little wisps of smoke coming off, and now comes the point at which everything really starts. Here. So you take your flour, you dump it in, and you start whisking. And what you're trying to get, you got to keep it moving. You can turn it up, say a little higher. A little higher. Move this way. Oh yeah. And you can see it getting darker as I speak. Now, the color you're trying to get to is basically sort of a mahogany color. It's already a peanut butter. And it's getting darker by the second. And the idea of keeping it moving is to keep it from burning. Be careful when you do this because this stuff's screaming hot. If it's splashing on yourself, it's not pleasant. All right, so we're almost there. Almost there. Get it up, turn it up. Can you see? All right. All right. Now, there's the mahogany color I'm looking for. All right. So you take, to stop the cooking, switch to your spoon, and you dump in half of it. Put this in back. And that immediately lowers the temperature in the pot. And there's a very easy time as far as timing. The timing on this is I don't think that's it. It's that. It's that. Leave a towel in front of it.
You're very brave to do this all without an apron, Ron.
Not there, baby. Up there. There you go. Yeah. Telephone on it? All right. Sorry about that. You take the spice mix, dump it in. What? Reset it. Anyway, I was going to tell you before the alarm went off that there's a very easy trick to remembering the timing. You cook for 1 minute after you add the first load of vegetables. You cook 2 minutes after the second load of vegetables. 2 minutes after the spice mix. And at the end of that 2-minute period, you add your garlic, cook for 1 more minute, and the roux is done. So 1, 2, 2, 1. And all the time the heat is at its highest level. You have to stay with it and keep stirring to keep it from burning. If you've seasoned your cast iron well enough, it really won't stick that much. But it'll stick on the edges. Okay. So I think that's about the 2 minutes. And in goes the garlic. It's about maybe 4 cloves. And for the final minute, spread it around. Smell is wonderful. Wonderful odor. And that's about it. That's it. Turn the heat off. Move the pot off the burner, and there you go. This is what it looks like. It looks like rather unattractive goop. But that's what it's supposed to look like. So, you freed up the main burner. So now I'm going to take the gumbo pot. Okay. Yeah, we can turn that off. Is that better? Oh. And this is andouille. Andouille is easy to find in Louisiana. It's everywhere. You go to the supermarket and there are about 5 or 6 different varieties of it. Up here, it's a lot harder to find, but I found I found 2 different kinds at Stop and Shop. So, in fact, everything in this recipe has come from Stop and Shop, except the shrimp and the crab meat, which came from Glidden's. Well, and the filet, which I had to, the filet is something I got off Amazon. This, you can get this anywhere in New Orleans, but up here I simply couldn't find it on island. It's quite inexpensive, by the way. It's not a very pricey thing. So you take your andouille, cut it into pieces like this. This is half d'Artagnan andouille and half, who's the other guy? Oh, anyway, whoever the whatever the, I can't remember. But it's the people who make knockwursts and all that other stuff. Anyway, they happen to have an andouille, which kind of surprised me. But so it's half and half of those things. Half of the d'Artagnan and half of the other variety. And at least the d'Artagnan is readily available at Stop and Shop and also at Bartlett's. If any of you out there are vegans or vegetarians, and you don't want to eat pork, or you can't eat pork, there is a chicken version of andouille that's sold at Bartlett's. So something for your interest, huh? What? Well, not vegan. But there are people who don't eat pork. You can still make this with the chicken andouille.
Where would you find it in Stop and Shop? Is it over in the meat aisle, or is it like by the hot dogs, or?
It's over by the meat counter.
Okay, like where you'd find.
Right underneath in front. Yeah. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm browning the andouille, and I'll need something to put it in. Could you give me a bowl? Well, up there at the top. Yeah, that's perfect. So I use it. So what I'm trying to do is get I'm trying to get the pie art effect happening. So the pie art effect is when you brown any meat, which is why you brown meats, it changes some of the proteins into other flavor compounds. That's why brown meat tastes better than not brown meat. And so I'm trying to do the same thing here to increase the flavors that you're getting from the meat portion of the dish. So it doesn't have to be a heavy brown. Just you just want to get it going. So this shouldn't take more than a minute or so. Let me think. What else do you need to know? Oh, one of the things I should mention, if any of you actually get the book by Paul Prudhomme, which is called Louisiana Kitchen, it's this book. You can see it. That work? Yeah. Anyway, this is his first book, and it came out back in 1964. Oh, this is a long time ago. 1964 this came out. He published a bunch of books after this, but none of them were as good as the first one. And a couple of things you want to notice about this book is there's a visual presentation of what various roux are supposed to look like. You can see it. And he would have used this one, the black roux. I don't have the guts to go that far, but because you can easily go from black roux to burnt roux. Okay, I think that's enough of
The other
it.
thing is about Myrna's pepper.
And there are two things. If you go to his book and you look at his recipe for this dish, you will notice that he uses 3/4 of a cup of oil and 3/4 of a cup of flour. I used 1/3 of each. Because the first time I made this, it was way too thick, at least for my taste. Because I'm used to a gumbo that's thinner. Whereas a Cajun like Prudhomme would be more used to gumbos that are very thick. Plus I have to cut the amount of pepper in half because his pepper was ridiculously hot. Anyway, now we have a pot, the gumbo pot, which has in the bottom a fond, as you can see, created by the meat, the browning of the meat. And that's what I want. Now, the next step is to take stock, which I've been heating on the side, and to add that to your gumbo pot, which I will do right now. And the question is, what's in the stock? Well,
It's gonna roll over. It's gonna go over.
there we go. There. And the question is, what's in the stock? Well, the stock was made with the with plain water and with the shells from the shrimp. Now, in New Orleans, you would have the pleasure of putting shrimp heads in your stock, which would make a much better stock, much more redolent. But you can't get shrimp with heads on them up here. It's just not possible. I got these shrimps. The shrimp I got were from Glidden's because I was a little leery about the shrimp, the frozen shrimp at Stop and Shop, because they were all from Indonesia and Vietnam and all kinds of strange places. If at all possible, you should use shrimp from the Gulf, which I think are superior shrimp. And also, you're not quite sure about the processing of shrimp overseas in Asia. So if you want to play it safe, you should also get wild caught shrimp, which is very hard to find in Asia. Most of them are farmed. So I'd recommend you go to Glidden's or some other place that has a shrimp from the Gulf that's wild caught. In this case, it was a Mexican, they're called the Mexican blue shrimp, but they're very similar to the shrimp that I caught off the coast of Louisiana in the Gulf of Mexico. In any event, this is already boiling, terrific. Now, you bring the stock to a boil and then add the roux in spoonfuls. Also, I added another thing you could do with the stock. If you wanted to embellish it and make it a little richer, you could try to go to your fishmonger and ask them if you can pull that back a little bit. It's cutting my head off. There you go. A little more down. Down. There you go. Ask them if they can put aside some lobster bodies for you. You know, what's left of a lobster after you take the meat out. That'll only work here in the summer because that's the only time Glidden's or the other places carry lobster meat. And they usually just throw the head away. But the head has a lot of flavor, like any other crustacean, be it shrimp or be it crawfish or anything else. So you could add that. So you could add that to your stock and make it a little more redolent stock.
Hey, Ron, say I did like a lobster boil and I
Yeah.
had the lobster and I ate what I wanted. Could I throw the bodies or the head in the freezer and use them another time, or they're supposed to be raw before you use them in a stock?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as your lobster boil wasn't flavored. As long as you didn't use something like old base seasoning or some other flavor on the lobster. But if you just cook the lobster and for some reason you didn't like tamale, which is the good stuff in the head, yeah, that's what you could do. And in fact, that's basically what you're asking. You're asking the fishmonger to do for you, and say, you know, the next time you guys boil up some lobsters to have lobster meat, just put a few of the heads aside, stick them in the freezer, and I'll come and get them. And they usually do that for next to nothing because it's just stuff they throw away. In any event, the other thing I did with this stock is I added a couple of bottles of clam juice. In New Orleans, I would have added something called oyster water, which is available readily in New Orleans. oyster water in New Orleans, unlike Boston, unlike Massachusetts, you can actually get oysters shucked. They will sell it to you. They sell you to you in quarts or pints of shucked oysters. And in the process of shucking the oysters, they capture the water that comes out of the oyster. And they sell that separately in quarts or pints. So you can actually go to a fish store and buy oyster water without buying oysters. And that adds another level of flavor to the stock. So if I were doing it, as I mentioned it in the recipe, that if you had access to oyster water, you can substitute that for some of the plain water. That's another way of dressing up your stock a little bit. The other thing I did was I added some chicken broth, because there's almost always a chicken element of some kind in filet gumbos in New Orleans. And mainly because it's cheap. And what they're using is not breast meat and thighs. They're usually using things like backs, necks, and gizzards, that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of chicken you, so there's an element of chicken taste in there. So to add that level of taste, I took some chicken broth. If you had chicken stock, that'd be even better. And added that to the shrimp stock when I put that into here. Okay. So now I've got everything in the pot. The roux is dissolved into the liquid, and it now looks like this. Sort of a thick soup, right? So now I can throw in the andouille. In goes the andouille. And that has to cook for about 15 minutes before you add the last items you're going to add are shrimp, or crab meat, shrimp, and crab. And the very last item is filet. So I'm going to do that after it's cooked a while. So this is the point at which questions would be entertained, if you have any.
If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, you're welcome to do that. Or if you're feeling a little shy and you just want to put it in the chat, I'll let Ron know. I have a question. So two questions, actually, one and a follow-up. So this recipe you're making, about how many servings does it make?
It depends on how greedy your guests are. I'd say 10.
Okay. And assuming you don't make it all in one night, what's the best way to make it last? Like just leave it in the fridge? Can you freeze?
Put it in the fridge. You can freeze it.
Mhm.
Absolutely, it'll freeze. It's perfectly fine frozen.
Yeah, cool.
Because everything in there is at that point is cooked. There's nothing that's going to suffer that much from reheating.
Yeah.
The only thing that would suffer a little bit in reheating are the shrimp, because shrimp tend to get rubbery if they're overcooked.
Yeah.
So, but if that's okay with you and that doesn't give you much concern, the flavor is not changed at all. So that's fine.
Rosemary, do you have a question?
Yes. Can you substitute the shrimp for crawfish?
Can you substitute, well, in what? I've actually never seen crawfish gumbo. I'll be honest with you. I'm not aware of any. I mean, you know, crawfish is.
I've had it before.
Crawfish is something that in Louisiana, you're either going to do a crawfish boil, or you're going to do a crawfish etouffee, or a crawfish bisque.
I've had crawfish gumbo before.
Yeah, you had a gumbo. There's no reason why it couldn't go in a gumbo. You could either put the whole crawfish in. You could use the crawfish heads in making the stock.
Yes.
And put the tail meat in the gumbo.
Okay.
That would be a great way to do it. But it's kind of hard to get crawfish up here.
You can get it at the Stop and Shop, but it's frozen.
Yeah, it's frozen, and I'm not. Just make sure it's from Louisiana.
Okay.
There's a lot of crawfish that comes from China. And quite frankly, that is an inferior product.
Yes.
The crawfish from Louisiana is much better. It has more fat in it. It's something we call fat.
Yeah.
People down in Louisiana call crabs have fat, crawfish have fat. It's that nasty yellow stuff.
It's the same thing in my country. We call it fat too.
You call it that too? Okay. What country is that?
Jamaica.
Dominica? Oh, okay.
Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Jamaica. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's that's the good stuff. A lot of flavor in that.
We have a personal question from Larry and Peggy. They wanted to know what your graduate studies were that took you north.
Law school for me. Myrna was social work. She got her her master's in social work from Simmons and her PhD from Brandeis. And I had my stinking JD from Harvard. But we just fell in love with New England. The idea of hills, which the tallest thing in New Orleans was a overpass.
Yeah.
So it was charming to see hills and the ocean. Yeah. Most people think New Orleans is right on the water, but it isn't. It's 80 miles upriver.
Wow.
From
Yeah.
the Gulf. And in fact, to get to the Gulf, you have to go to Mississippi. Yeah, to get to a beach. There's a lake, but there's no real beaches. There's a huge lake right north of the city, which is not actually a lake. It's actually an inlet. It's connected to the Gulf. Anyway, so while we're waiting for the andouille to become part of the gumbo, any other questions?
I just wanted to remind a few people came in late at different parts. So this is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again on our YouTube channel, and you can go back and watch some of our other Yummy Mondays that we've recorded there. And I think I mentioned it already, but these spice packets, we have a limited supply, but if you stop by the library, they're open Monday through Saturday, 9:30 to 2 o'clock. And you can pick up a packet. It's right there in the foyer. You'll see them in a shoebox. So you can go ahead and take one of those. Courtesy of Annie Whole Foods, which is now going to be 100 Mile Makers. I don't know if people heard the news, so that'll be exciting.
That's exciting.
So do you make gumbo the same way every time you make it?
No, sometimes I make okra gumbo, which I love. Which is trickier.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of chose not to make that one because, and sometimes I would use a Creole recipe gumbo, which is slightly different and thinner, which is the gumbo that Myrna and I grew up eating. We didn't grow up eating this. We grew up eating other gumbo. But once I tried this, I fell in love with it. So.
What makes the okra gumbo harder to make?
It's the okra. I don't know if you've ever cooked okra, but it's sort of like the culinary equivalent of alien.
Yeah.
When you cook it, it gives off a slime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's disgusting. The first time you experience it, it's just disgusting. But you have to cook it and cook it beyond the slime. You have to keep cooking it. Even though you think, my God, I'm ruining this. You're not really ruining it. It's getting better. And eventually it forms a coating on the bottom of the pan, and you'd swear you'd ruined it, that it's burnt and all the rest of that thing. You'd have all these bad things in your head. But actually, once you add some stock to it and dissolve that fond on the bottom, it's delicious.
Yeah.
It really is. It's yummy. And the slime goes away.
Mhm.
So by the time you eating it, there's no slime left, and it has a really deep flavor. It's lovely. It's a lovely gumbo.
Yeah, I've cooked it a couple times. I mean, it was edible and it was good, but you're right, it has that slime. And I was like, am I cooking it too long? Well, and I've cooked frozen, but I imagine when you do, you use fresh okra, right?
Well, it's actually the frozen. I've cooked it with using frozen sliced okra, and it's fine. And frozen sliced okra has the same properties.
Mhm.
You know, that it's going to develop that slime. you have to stick with it and cook through it.
Yeah.
Is what you need to do. High heat, high heat is your friend.
Yeah. I know I'm having stove envy because we actually have an electric stove.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit harder. You just have to make sure you have a burner to move.
Yeah. Just pick whichever burner you have, even if you have a covered stove with a cooktop. You can still do it. There's usually a burner on there that's bigger than the others,
Mhm.
bigger,
Yeah.
circumference. That's the one you want to use.
Mhm.
It's not important for the rest of the recipe, but it's kind of hard to make a roux like this kind of roux,
Yeah.
unless you have that high heat burner.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you have a lower heat burner, you can still do it. It's just going to take longer.
Mhm.
And you might not get it quite as dark.
Mhm.
All right.
And tell them they are gonna get smoke from the roof, so you need to have.
Oh, and the other thing is, you're going to get smoke. So make sure your exhausts are at maximum.
Yeah, we don't have that, but I did. I bought a grill a couple of years ago, and it actually has a side burner. So what I might do is, if I'm gonna make it wait and use that side.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, it's not so much our smoke detector goes off, our dog goes off. As soon as they start smoking, she goes bananas.
Well, it's a smoke detector, right?
Yeah, I know, or a little firefighter running around the apartment.
Right. I think we've had enough time at this stage. So we can start adding the seafood. We're almost there, like within minutes. I know, thank you. I'm gonna add, this is crab meat, and this crab meat I got from Stop and Shop, actually. And it's, the reason I got it from Stop and Shop is it's claw crab meat, which is cheaper than jumbo lump crab meat, which is what you can find at all the other places. At 167 and Glidden's and Meat and Fish, they all have jumbo lump crab meat, which runs $30, $40 a pound. This was $19.99, $20. And crab meat, and claw crab meat is what we normally use in New Orleans because it tastes more like crab, basically. So in that goes mix that in. That was 1 pound of crab meat. And now we have the shrimp that were peeled and deveined right here. And the ones I used were from, the one I used from Glidden's is actually already deveined. So it's not peeled, the peel is still on it, but it has been deveined. So it's a split right down the back. So that was kind of useful. So in go the shrimp. Some are whole and some are halved. And the reason for that is not all of the shrimp I got were the same size. The ones in the package that came frozen were 21 by 25s, 21 25s, which is a shrimp size. And it means there are about 21 to 25 shrimp per pound. What you really want, you could use smaller ones. But 21 to 25 is about as big as you'd want. And I wanted a few more shrimp. And at the point I was getting it, the only thing they had were 16 to 20s, 16 to 19s. So I got some of those and cut them in half, longitudinally, not through the back, but just so that there's nothing too big on your spoon. The thing is to make sure that you don't have something, you want something that'll fit on a spoon. Right? So that goes in, bring it back up to a boil. And the last thing, well, next to the last thing to go in are crabs. Now, in Louisiana, you'd have something called Gumbo Crabs, which are actually sold by the fishmonger. And what they are crabs that have been killed. I don't know whether kindly or not, but they're fresh. They haven't been cooked. And the back has been taken off. The apron on the belly has been removed. The gills have been removed. And any unwanted thingies inside the crab have been removed. So what you have is the crab body and the fins sticking out and the claw. And you can buy that virtually every seafood market has them. And it's, yeah, even the supermarket, you can go to the supermarket. Here, you can't find that. I don't know why people don't catch crabs here, but they don't. Any event, we're talking about crabs in the ocean. I happen to find some of these, which are Jonah crab claws that were frozen, that I got at Glidden's. So I said, well, why not? So I tried them one time and they actually work pretty good. It doesn't change the taste of the gumbo. There's plenty enough taste, but it does add a nice bite if you put that in the plate, that a little bite of that crab claw once it absorbs the flavor of the, because it's a nice big chunk of meat on that claw. And they come already cracked, so which is cool. So in that goes. And then we cook that for just a couple of minutes. Let it run.
Tell them how it's served in walls. Like it's served as first, it's not usually the main course as we use it here as a main course.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you can hear it. This is a dinner. But in New Orleans, this was always actually traditionally served as a first course on certain feast days, on like Easter, Christmas, or you know, Thanksgiving even, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you'd serve the gumbo around 1 o'clock
Mhm. In the day.
in the daytime. And then you'd go and watch the football game or whatever you were watching on TV. And then later you'd have dinner. So, but here this can easily serve 10 people. If I had 10 claws, but
As
some
a
people
main
won't get
course.
claws.
Yeah, it can serve as a main course.
It can serve as a main course, yeah.
And if you served it as a main course, would you serve it with anything else like bread, rice, or?
Yes.
Crunchy bread would be wonderful.
Rice, definitely.
Definitely, it has to be served over something. I think so.
Over rice.
It has to be served over rice to be a gumbo. So, I mean, you could serve it without the rice if you had a problem with rice.
Or potato salad.
Yeah, you could use potato salad. But normally it's almost invariably it's served over rice. So it's filling in that sense.
Mhm.
And if you had some crispy French bread, and of course in New Orleans, French bread doesn't mean what it means here. If anybody's been to New Orleans, they had a po' boy sandwich or something like that, you know the French breads that are made in New Orleans are much lighter. They're longer, lighter, much airier than traditional French baguette. So it just works with this kind of food because it's not so heavy. But so I think the closest thing you'd get here, if you wanted to approximate it, would be Italian.
But I remember, I imagine having it with like a really crusty, kind of like, almost like a toast or something, and dipping it.
Yeah, I mean, you could do that. Take an Italian bread, stick it in the grill, or stick it under the toaster and then broiler.
Yeah.
And that would be lovely. Okay, this is done.
Someone has a question about what kind of rice you would serve it with.
Plain white, not flavored. You could use brown rice if you were so inclined. No one in Louisiana would do that, but if you, for some reason, had an issue with white rice, you want to put some in? Yeah. Let me see if I can show you a little more about what this looks like. So it looks sort of like that. See, it's not that thick, which is how I like it. How we like it. Okay, put a little more. Yeah. That's good.
Oh, and you could tell them that some people add hot sauce, although some chefs
Oh.
don't like you to add
Oh,
hot
wait a minute, I
sauce.
almost forgot.
Okay.
You gotta add the filet.
Yes,
So you'd add about 2 tablespoons of filet,
And what is that, Ron?
ground sassafras.
Right.
So in goes the filet. It's an odd smell. It doesn't smell like anything else that I'm aware of. It's a peculiar spice. Oops. You just stir that in, and that both flavors the gumbo and thickens it a little bit more. Okay, now we're ready to go. That doesn't require much cooking at all because it's going into a hot liquid. It'll do its thing almost immediately. Okay, so now we have here's a plate with some rice on it. And we'll take the gumbo and spoon it in. Yeah. And get the, okay. Okay, so we can put that down now. Sure. And here's about to have the gumbo syndrome here on my computer. But there's the dish.
Wow.
and some people add Tabasco or hot sauce.
Now here, you can add as much hot sauce as you like, although in the spice mix is white pepper, black pepper, and cayenne. Okay,
Wow. Great.
okay. So
Yeah, we're just about at time. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we wrap up? I saw a few people that had put thank you, and it's a great recipe, and they're excited to be here. We have some clapping. Ron, Myrna, do you have any final thoughts? Anything you want to share?
Well, just know that if you add Tabasco or hot sauce to your gumbo, you have to be careful who you do that around, because President Obama, when he was visiting New Orleans, he went to a restaurant named Dookie Chase and he had Mrs. Chase's gumbo, and he added hot sauce to his gumbo, and she was not happy.
Very upset.
And he has not lived that down.
Good to know.
But sometimes we like to add the hot sauce. maybe.
Yeah, I like
To
hot sauce.
Tabasco. Yeah,
So.
to it.
Any other, anybody else have any questions?
Will you package and deliver some gumbo?
Well, that would be nice. Maybe when there's a fair at one of the churches or something, we can make a gumbo.
I don't know if they'll let us do it because the last time I did something for St.
St. Mary's.
Mary's.
We did red beans and
We
rice.
did red beans and rice. And they made us, what you're supposed to do is have the red beans and then pour it over the rice just before you serve it. But
The Board of Health.
some Board of Health law said I couldn't have rice.
You couldn't have rice
You couldn't just be
sitting,
sitting there. Right,
not warmed. You have to, it had to be on the fire.
right. So when I wasn't looking, they dumped all the rice into the red beans.
That's weird. Because people normally eat cold rice, so.
You could put cold rice in a bowl, but once you dump a bunch of hot red beans over it, they won't be cold anymore. But by the time they finished with my dish, it was basically rice with red beans, not red beans and rice. Way too much rice to red
Yes.
bean ratio. Anyway, so how many are going to try doing this themselves? Carol?
Oh,
that's
wow,
it.
okay, good.
All right, great.
Yeah. And we're happy to answer any questions if anyone has any questions later on.
And I'll send Janet the Okra Gumbo recipe as well. So,
Yeah.
which is based on Leah Chase's recipe
Mhm.
from Dookie Chase.
And I'll email everyone the link to the YouTube video in case you want to watch it again. And just in case someone missed the download of the recipe, I'll send it along with the okra recipe. So,
Okay.
and you can send us back pictures of your results. Let us know how it went.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Myrna. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And as I said, next week, Daniel and Thais will be showing us how to use your air fryer. So if you're thinking about getting one or you have one, come on back and you'll get some tips and tricks.
That'd be
Okay.
useful.
Looking forward to that.
Have a great night, everyone. Thank you, guys. This was
Thank
fantastic.
you. Okay.
Thank you.
See you all.
Bye.